and welcome to Behind the Story with A.R. Simpson. I'm glad you're here. Whether you're driving to work, tending the yard, feeding chickens, folding laundry, or simply enjoying a quiet moment, thank you for inviting me into your day. Let's spend some time together. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Here on Behind the Story, we begin every episode by reading a chapter from one of my books. Then together, we'll go behind the story to discover the inspiration, the life lessons, and the faith woven into it. Along the way, we'll also talk about writing, life on our little homestead, and hear stories of God's faithfulness from listeners just like you. Before we begin today's chapter, I'd like to leave you with one thought. Sometimes the biggest decisions in our lives begin with one small thought. Every great story begins with a single page. Let's turn today's page together. Chapter 4. The Hidden Trail. Emma woke before everyone else. At first, she wasn't sure why. The campground was quiet. The birds hadn't fully started singing yet. The sky outside the tent still carried the pale gray-blue color that came just before sunrise. For a moment, she lay still inside her sleeping bag, listening. The distant lapping of water against the shore, a breeze moving through the pine branches, the soft snoring coming from Lily's side of the tent. Emma smiled. Lily could sleep through almost anything. Thunderstorms, car rides, church sermons, apparently wilderness adventures too. Carefully, Emma unzipped her sleeping bag and crawled toward the tent door. She stepped outside into the cool mountain air. The campsite felt completely different this early in the morning. Peaceful, private, almost magical. Mist drifted across the lake below them. The mountains stood dark against the brightening sky. Emma wrapped her arms around herself and took a deep breath. The air smelled like pine trees and dew. And freedom. That was the word that surprised her. Freedom. At home, there always seemed to be something she was supposed to do. Homework, chores, practices, appointments, even fun things had schedules. Out here, everything felt slower, bigger, more open. For the first time in months, Emma felt like she could think, really think, not just react to whatever came next. She walked to the edge of the campsite and sat on the fallen log. The same log Dad had pointed out their first day. The same log that marked the edge of camp. The same log beyond which the deer trail disappeared into the woods. Without meaning to, her eyes drifted toward it, the trail. Even now it caught her attention. The opening seemed clearer this morning, more obvious, more inviting, like it was saying, "Come look, just for a minute." Emma immediately frowned at herself. That was ridiculous. Trails didn't talk. Still, she wondered where it went. "You're staring at it again." Emma nearly jumped. Dad stood behind her holding two steaming mugs, one coffee, one hot chocolate, just like the first morning. "You scared me." "Good." Dad handed her the hot chocolate. "You should be alert in the wilderness." Emma rolled her eyes. "That doesn't count." "It absolutely counts." Dad sat beside her. For a while, they watched the sunrise together. The sky slowly drifted from gray to gold. The lake began to sparkle. Bird song spread through the forest. A new day was beginning. Finally, Dad nodded toward the woods. "Still curious?" Emma glanced at him. "A little." Dad smiled. "That's not a bad thing." "Really?" "Nope." Emma looked surprised. "I thought curiosity got people into trouble." Dad chuckled. "Curiosity helps people discover things." A pause. "Uncontrolled curiosity gets people into trouble." That sounded exactly like something a dad would say. And annoyingly, it made sense. "How do you know the difference?" Dad thought for a moment, then pointed toward the campsite. Because healthy curiosity works with wisdom. He pointed toward the trail. Unhealthy curiosity ignores it. Emma sipped her hot chocolate. That answer stayed with her, even after breakfast, even after Lily woke up, even after the day officially began. The family spent the morning hiking Cedar Loop. The trail wound through towering pines and patches of wildflowers. Birds darted overhead. Sunlight filtered through the branches. For nearly 2 hours, everything was perfect. Then Lily got bored. My feet hurt. Dad looked back. We've been walking 20 minutes. My feet are dramatic. Mom laughed. Emma shook her head. You are dramatic. That too. The trail eventually opened onto a scenic overlook. Everyone stopped. The view stretched for miles. Mountains rolled across the horizon in blue and green waves. The lake shimmered far below. Even Lily went quiet. Wow. Emma nodded. No argument there. Dad pointed toward a distant ridge. See that? Emma squinted. A tiny structure stood barely visible against the skyline. What is it? Fire tower. Lily gasped. Can we go there? No. Why not? Because it's not part of this trail. That's a weak reason. Dad laughed. Actually, it's an excellent reason. Emma noticed something then. Every marked trail on the map had signs, markers, directions. The deer trail near camp had none. For some reason, that fact suddenly seemed important. By afternoon, they were back at camp. Mom started organizing supplies for dinner. Dad worked on gathering firewood. Lily began collecting interesting sticks. Apparently this was now a hobby. Emma sat beneath a pine tree reading. At least, she tried to read. The problem was that she kept looking toward the woods, toward the trail, toward the place curiosity kept pulling her attention. Finally, Lily appeared beside her. You're doing it again. What? Thinking. Emma sighed. What a terrible crime. You get that face. What face? The face where you're thinking about something you're not supposed to do. Emma looked horrified. I do not. You absolutely do. Emma hated how accurate that sounded. Lily sat beside her. Are you thinking about the trail? No. A pause. Maybe. Lily grinned immediately. I knew it. For a while, neither sister spoke. The woods waited quietly beyond the campsite. The trail remained hidden among the trees. Then Lily lowered her voice. We could just look. Emma immediately shook her head. No. Not go down it. No. Just look. No. One tiny look. Emma glared. You sound like a villain in a movie. Lily considered this. That's fair. Still, the idea lingered. Not because Emma planned to do it, because part of her wanted to, and that bothered her a lot. That evening, the family gathered around the campfire again. The flames danced against the glowing darkness. Stars appeared overhead. Mom opened her Bible. Tonight's devotion focused on wisdom, listening, making good choices before bad situations happened. Emma shifted uncomfortably. Every topic seemed strangely connected to the trail, which was ridiculous. Nobody knew she kept thinking about it. Nobody except Lily, and Lily couldn't keep a secret longer than 10 minutes. Emma keeps staring at the deer trail. Emma closed her eyes. Of course. Dad looked up. Mom blinked. Lily smiled proudly. I told you. Thank you, Lily, Emma muttered. You're welcome. Dad studied Emma carefully. Not angry, not disappointed, just thoughtful. You know curiosity isn't wrong. Emma looked up. Then why does it feel like everyone keeps warning me about it? Dad poked the fire thoughtfully. Because curiosity is powerful. The crackling flames reflected in his eyes. It can lead you somewhere amazing. A pause. Or somewhere dangerous. The words settled over the campfire. Neither dramatic nor frightening. Simply true. Emma stared into the flames. The trail wasn't dangerous. At least, she didn't think it was. It was probably just an animal path. Probably. Still, Dad's story from yesterday echoed in her memory. One extra minute. One extra turn. One quick look. Most bad decisions start small. Later that night, after everyone crawled into their sleeping bags, Emma lay awake. Moonlight filtered through the tent walls. The campground had grown quiet. Beside her, Lily slept peacefully. Outside, the forest whispered in the wind. Emma stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was their final day at Pine Ridge. After that, they would pack up and head home. Part of her felt disappointed. The trip seemed to be ending too quickly. She thought about the lake, the mountains, the hiking trails, the campfires. Then she thought about the deer trail. Tomorrow, one last day, one last chance to discover where it went. The thought slipped into her mind before she could stop it. And unlike the first time, she didn't push it away immediately. Instead, she lay there listening to the wind, wondering, questioning, curious. Outside, beyond the fallen log, the narrow trail wound silently through the darkness, waiting. And thinking about it now, Emma wasn't sure she intended to ignore it. That was chapter 4 of Lost Beneath the Pines. Now, let's go behind the story. As I was writing this chapter, I realized something that I think all of us experience at one time or another. Emma hasn't done anything wrong. She hasn't stepped onto the deer trail. She hasn't disobeyed her parents. She hasn't wandered into the woods. She's simply wrestling with a thought. And if we're honest, that's where most of our decisions begin. A quiet thought, a simple idea, a little whisper that says, just look, just this once. Nobody will know. That's what makes this chapter different from the ones before it. The real conflict isn't happening out in the woods. It's happening inside Emma's heart. One of my favorite lines in this chapter comes from Mike when he says, healthy curiosity works with wisdom. Unhealthy curiosity ignores it. I love that because curiosity itself isn't bad. In fact, curiosity is one of the reasons people become explorers and scientists and inventors, artists, and authors. Curiosity helps us learn. It helps us grow. It helps us discover the incredible world that God created just for us. But wisdom helps us know where curiosity should stop. Not every path that catches our attention is one we're meant to follow. As I wrote this chapter, I felt myself thinking about my own life. There have been times when I knew something probably wasn't the wisest choice. Nothing huge sometimes, just little moments, a shortcut, distraction, a decision that looked harmless on the surface. Those moments remind me that our biggest choices, they don't often begin with dramatic events. They begin with quiet thoughts. What's going on up here in your head? And those thoughts eventually shape our actions. That's why I wanted to slow this chapter down. Some readers may notice that there isn't a great deal of action here. Maybe it was even a little boring, or maybe you're already getting to that point where you're like, okay, when are they going to go? You know they're going to the trail. When is this going to happen? But that was intentional because sometimes the biggest moments in a story aren't the action scenes. They're the moments when someone is deciding who they're going to become. Emma right now is standing at that kind of moment. She's deciding whether wisdom or curiosity will have the louder voice. I think we all stand in moments like that. One verse that comes to mind is from 1 Corinthians 10:23. Everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Just because we can do something doesn't always mean we should. One sentence that stayed with me while preparing for today's episode: not every opportunity is an invitation from God. Sometimes the wisest decision we make is choosing not to walk down a path that isn't meant for us. That's something to keep in mind, something that even I need to remember. I get excited about things and you just want to jump on them like, oh, I really want to do that. No, I want this. But you need to always turn to God first. Really pray about it and find out if that is the route that God has led out for you. Always, I think it's always a good thing to kind of have that thought in the back of your head. But now we're going to go ahead and move on to behind the keyboard. This episode, I wanted to talk about the publishing aspect of my book a little further into it like I did last week. I hope not too many of you listening find this part boring, but I really like sharing every part of this whole process I've experienced. Because like I've mentioned, who knows, maybe someone is hoping to do this one day. And I really I love the idea of knowing like maybe I helped, even just in a small way, to have like I helped someone else reach their dream. So, once I felt that I had my book ready, as ready as I thought it would be, and I started uploading everything to Amazon, or it's called KDP, which stands for Kindle Direct Publishing. On there, I had to choose what kind of file was being uploaded. Remember, I mentioned before, it was either a book, I think it said like journal, children's book even, something like that. I needed to write a description, choose the genre it'd be in, even the size of the book you'd want, because they have, like 5.5 by 8.5, 6 by 9, like all these little details you think don't go into it. You had to choose whether you wanted it to be paperback, hardcover, even an ebook, which you can do all of them, but they are each a separate file, so it was a whole new process. You had to upload each one individually, and the formatting, that was the hardest time I had with this. So the cover has to fit within certain borders. The color needs to reach to a certain point, or you'd have to choose, I believe it was like called bleed. There's a bleed option. So you even have to think about that, like what kind of cover you'd like. There's really just a lot of small decisions and editing that needs to be done, which is kind of to be expected, right? But with this being my first book, I really had no idea what all it would entail. It definitely got a little frustrating a few times. I remember telling my husband I didn't know if I should even go forward with it. And funny enough, I actually had a much harder time publishing my children's book versus this chapter book. Because, the children's book obviously had pictures, a lot of pictures, a lot of color. And I feel like, I don't know how many times I had to keep uploading a copy. And, oh, no, this margin is wrong. Oh, no, this color format's wrong. Like, it was over and over again. But I just kept taking it day by day. And other than my husband and children, no one knew I was doing this. So there really was no rush. There was no urgency, like I needed to get it done. So in the end, of course, like anything else, it's not perfect. I see things even now that I could have fixed, changed, taken out. But this was my first step in doing something that makes me happy, and I'm hoping that can bring joy to others as well. So, as frustrating as it was, I'm glad I did it. And as frustrating as it is to see mistakes that I made in my story, it was like a whole learning experience. And so far, I've really loved it. And it's even led me to this, the podcast. So, it's kind of hard for me to regret anything. Of course, my books I'm working on now, I'm trying to be a little more diligent, a little more paying attention to details and everything. I want to make sure it's even better. I just want it to go up from here. I want it to be better each time. So hopefully, those of you that have read this book and plan on reading future books, I really am praying that you'll be able to see the progression. You'll see the improvements that I'm making as I'm doing this. But as I've mentioned in the past, I just need to take a leap of faith and do it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least I tried, and I am praying to God, and I know He's there with me and helping me move forward. So that's just a little into the process that I've experienced in publishing my first book so far. Now, let's head around the homestead. I was really able to connect this week's chapter and the lesson behind it with my experience so far in our homesteading journey. One thing I've noticed about our animals is that they are naturally curious. Our kitten, her name's Meadow, especially seems convinced that every corner of the house, every box, and every new sound just simply has to be investigated. Sometimes that curiosity makes us laugh, like when she pops out of a box we didn't know she was in and scares one of my daughters that when they're walking by. And sometimes it creates a little extra work for us, like when she decided the open bag of rice hanging just a little too much over the edge of the table looked like a new toy and ended with rice all over the floor. So watching her just has reminded me that curiosity is a part of how we're made. It's a gift, but like so many gifts God gives us, it needs wisdom to guide it. I've learned that some of life's best lessons don't come from the dramatic moments. Sometimes they come from caring for animals, slowing down, and paying attention to the everyday things God places right in front of us. And now we're going to go to the last segment of our show, which is Behind Your Story. I'm so excited for this week because I will be sharing our first story. This week, it's actually two stories in one. I wanted to share one of my own experiences of God answering a prayer, but it's also the story of how my husband came to know Christ. I do want to start by saying I made sure to talk with my husband and get his view, allow him to read over the episode, and receive his permission to share this. So, I have been in love with my husband since I was 15. I'm 31 now, and he is an amazing husband. He's an astounding father, but we were still naive kids at one point, and we made naive kid decisions. But there's absolutely no way I can look at the man my husband is now and the life we've built together and not choose this life again and again. So, growing up, I was blessed enough that I've always known who God was, and I've had my own personal relationship with Him. My husband, however, was aware of God, but not so much to where he had a personal connection with Him. Over the years, I don't think I paid much attention to where his journey was with the Lord, but as we got older and, there were small comments made here and there, I started to gather that maybe he didn't really know who God truly was. But he still never spoke very negatively about Christianity. And I was vocal about my faith, not as much as I wish I had, but I still, I let it be known that I was a Christian. And And I'm definitely not where I am now, but I think around our wedding is when I really started being able to see that maybe he did even see God or Christianity as a bad thing, or maybe God wasn't even real. But still, being young and so in love, I wanted to marry him. And at this time, we did already have our first daughter. So we got married, and I have this one very distinct memory of being in the car. We were in the parking lot of a gas station, and we were kind of starting to have a little argument about faith because I was now starting to speak up and ask questions like, do you even believe in God? Or why don't you believe in him? And I believe my husband said something along the lines of, no, I don't know if I believe in him, or I don't even know if, like, what's really out there. And at that point, that's when I started crying, and he didn't understand why. And I told him, when we got married, I signed up for forever. I want to know that you'll be with me in heaven, and it breaks my heart knowing you probably won't be. And that's when he just got so upset. And again, he said something like, you see, that's exactly why I don't like Christianity. You think I'm just going to go to hell? And he got out of the car and he went inside the store. So I just sat there bawling. But I made the decision right then and there that I wasn't going to push it anymore. I knew that this was beyond something I could change. This was something God needed to do. So at that moment, I closed my eyes and I prayed to God that he would work on my husband's heart and help bring him to God. So a couple years passed. I didn't push it again, but we did find a church that we started going to regularly. And thank the Lord, the pastor there, his name is Zeke Badia. We love him so much. Just the way he preaches is like you're listening to a friend, not someone who looks down on you or judges you. And the way he would explain his sermons, like even my husband was starting to tell me, like, oh, I really like how he explained that. I liked the message he gave today. And I think I really started seeing something slowly start changing in my husband's heart. But, we still weren't fully there yet. Well, so after that, some more time passes, and a deacon at our church decided he really wanted to put on a passion play at our church for Easter. Now, to this day, we're still a very small church. We're still struggling to grow, especially since COVID. So at this time, we didn't have like an abundance of volunteers to put on this play. So this deacon came to my husband and asked if he wouldn't mind playing Jesus. And to my surprise, my husband said yes. So we only had a couple weeks of rehearsal, and then it came the Friday evening of our play. Everything went wonderful. There's even like a really light storm outside that kind of added to the suspense of the play. And so at the very end, the church lights were dimmed. All of us actors were frozen in our final pose. So my husband, he was on the cross, his head down, eyes closed. And I played Mary, Jesus' mother. So I, along with the other two women who played the other Marys, were at his feet looking up at him. So we were all supposed to freeze and allow the audience to kind of come up and view us and just look over this final scene as they walk to the fellowship hall for some punch and cookies and things like that. So we're sitting there in our pose, just like we had practiced. And as I'm looking up at my husband, he opens his eyes. He still had his head down, but his eyes were open. And I just kind of gave him a look like, hey, what are you doing? Like, close your eyes. People are coming. And he closed them. And yeah, that was it. People came up to us. They viewed us. And then they went back. So we were able to change and then go join everyone. Well, when we get changed, my husband pulls me aside. So I asked him, like, hey, what happened? Like, why did you do that? And he tells me, and I'm going to try not to cry at this part. I always cry when I share this story. But he tells me, I felt like I was falling forward. I thought I was falling off the cross. But then I felt someone grab me and hold me onto it. So I opened my eyes to see who was there. But no one was there. And babe, it was Jesus. He held me onto the cross. Now keep in mind, when my husband is telling me this, he starts crying. And I've known my husband since I was 15 years old and he was 17. I have rarely seen him cry. Like, I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've seen him cry. But he's here crying, telling me what he felt on that cross. And since that day, there was no question to him. God was real and Jesus is alive. He was baptized about 2 months after that, and he just loves God now. And that night, I remember crying and looking up to the sky and just saying, God, thank you. Because it had been years that I was praying that he would find a way to bring my husband to him. And he did. He answered my prayer. And I will never forget that. So these are the kind of stories I'm hoping to share here. And maybe someone's story can inspire someone else to search for that relationship with God. I would love to hear your story. Like I said, I'm hoping it will be my favorite part of this podcast, the most inspiring, the most heartwarming part. So if you feel it in your heart, if you feel moved by God, you can email me here at behindthestorywithar@gmail.com. And you'll find that email in the video's description. And with your permission, I would love to share your story in future episodes and to encourage someone else. Because God is still writing stories every single day. Before we finish today, I'd like to leave you with one last thought. Wisdom isn't just knowing which path to take. It's knowing which path to leave unexplored. As you go through this week, I hope you remember that God isn't trying to keep us from good things. He's lovingly leading us toward His best. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I've really enjoyed it. And if today's episode encouraged you, I'd be honored if you'd follow the podcast and leave a review. It really helps more people discover the show and become part of this, I'm hoping, growing community. And don't forget, if you'd like to share your story, you can email me at behindthestorywithar@gmail.com or simply use the email listed in this episode's description. And don't forget to also put in the subject line, "Behind my story," so that I may find your story simpler. Whether your story feels extraordinary or wonderfully ordinary, it matters. Join me every Wednesday as we turn another page together. Remember, every chapter has meaning, every story matters, and God is still writing your story. God bless, and I'll see you next time on Behind the Story with A.R. Simpson.